You're listening to Paris: A State of Mind on Paris Underground Radio. For more great content, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio.
Welcome to Paris: A State of Mind. Join us as we talk about the good, the bad, the ins, the outs of property rentals and purchases in and around Paris. We'll have topics for renters, owners, and visitors, share questions we are regularly asked, and more. My name is Gail Boisclair of Perfectly Paris, and my co-host is Marie Pistinier of Lokim Paris. Be a part of it. Both of us are proud members of the SPLM, the first representative body of furnished rental professionals. Hello, everyone in podcast world. We are back in the studio for another episode of Paris: A State of Mind, and we're continuing on with our very popular series of what it's like living in certain neighborhoods. So we've been running around Paris virtually and talking to different people. So today we have the pleasure of having Comte de Saint-Germain, which Saint-Germain is actually a really good liqueur, just in case, like slightly off topic, if you didn't know that, who create GPS-guided audio tours in Paris, starting in the 14th arrondissement. And we're going to talk to him about all kinds of things. Welcome.
Thanks, Gail. Glad to be here. And I concur. I actually love the taste of, was that Sureau, elderflower?
Yes, elderflower, exactly.
Liquor, yeah, it's really nice. Great for spritz,
Well, actually, just like a little more aside about that is I much prefer Saint-Germain spritz to an Aperol spritz.
There you go. Your team, Hugo.
But getting on to the topic at hand, what arrondissement do you currently live in now?
In the 14th, le 14e.
Okay, and what's your closest metro station?
The closest is Alésia. So Alésia is on line 4, and that's for many people the official roundabout of the area is Alésia. So everybody will talk about the Alésia roundabout. The real name is the Place Victor and Hélène Bache, who were resistance fighters and human rights defenders during World War II, but everybody just calls it Alésia, and they see the roundabout and they see the church and they know what you mean.
Oh, wow. And that's a good little interesting tidbit already for people. And how long have you been living in that area?
So in this area, about 7 years now, and moved in, and actually now I'm buying there. So I'm going to, at some point, fully own the place where I live.
That's exciting. So that means you really like it, but we'll get to that in a minute. And why then, since you've only been there 7 years, what made you choose where you're living right now? Was it just a matter of what you found, or was it really a matter of choice?
Well, it was actually love. My partner, who has lived all around the planet, who's Irish, when she decided to put her life savings into an apartment, she said it had to be in the 14th. And ideally, it had to be south of the Montparnasse Cemetery and around the area of Rue Daguerre, which is this big shopping street that has this village feel. And so we started, walking around the 14th. And then by going through listings, we found that there are other cool parts of the 14th than just that Rue Daguerre area. And she had very strict criteria. It has to be a Haussmannian building. It has to have a 5th floor balcony, with the living room, dining room connected. And that I had one job. Actually, my job was to be the bad cop when we saw the apartment. I should trash the place. I should say, no, this is not great, so that she could be the good cop and enjoy all those features. And I failed. I failed miserably. The place was great, and she got the place. and now I moved in,
That's a funny story. Actually, it's a good one. And so you really love the area then? You feel as happy about the area as you did when you first moved there 7 years ago?
Oh yeah, even more so, because it's a very unknown part of the 14th. So the real estate agents call that the golden triangle of the 14th, but that has nothing to do with the golden triangle of Avenue Montaigne and all those fancy shops. It's just that there's this triangle of Haussmannian buildings right smack in the 14th, which look great because the entire streets are Haussmannian. If you've seen the movie Inception, when the buildings start to bend, that's this type of architecture we're talking about. But what I discovered was that this was so densely packed with shops and bars and things you can do locally that I always discover new things. Like just walking around that neighborhood is incredible, because there are more and more things that you've never heard about because it's a quiet place. And like when you were describing the 14th first in your main roundabout of all the arrondissement, you did like what most people do, which is, oh yeah, Montparnasse. And then, at best people go, yeah, Rue de la Gaîté, but that's like the tip of the iceberg. Like all the rest of the 14th is south of it and is actually much more interesting than the Montparnasse area. So it's really full of surprises. Yeah.
Well, and that's the whole reason why I wanted to do this series, because I thought, we all have preconceived ideas of what a particular area is like, but you really only know if you're living in it.
Exactly.
And so I can talk until I'm blue in the face about my area, but I certainly couldn't talk about your area because I don't know enough of it. Apart from liking it more and more every day and every year, etc., what do you like most about where you live?
I mean, for me, in many ways, it's the history, because it's a place that, a couple hundred years ago, it was a countryside. So it got built quite recently when it comes to the history of Paris. But it has incredible, World War II resistance related histories. It has incredible architecture. Like the first building by Le Corbusier in Paris is in my neighborhood. You have everything from Art Deco to the first brutalist architecture. Like the neighborhood church is made of red brick, which is not that common in Paris. They have an entire building, made of red brick, and be proud of it. You can find a little bit of everything. And also, there's even things that are older, like we have sections of the Roman aqueducts going through the arrondissement that have been unearthed. So you can walk in the street and see slabs of stones built there by the Romans to bring water to the Cluny spa, basically, and it's still there. So you would never know without actually coming here.
That's amazing.
It's crazy. So there's so much stuff. And also, let's face it, for me, my number one thing that I love about the 14th is the catacombs, because I go there every now and then. I was there completely legally yesterday for a special tour. And it actually impacts both the hobby aspect of, living here. Like the tourists come to the catacombs. They don't go any further south. They go to the catacombs and then they go home in the center. But actually that impacts your life a lot. Like, you got to make sure that your building is secure and the people doing the inspections check that the quarries under your ground floor are stable. But also, like just a few months ago, there's a guy who was doing to his basement and the floor gave way and he fell in a shaft of the catacombs that had not been properly covered up. So it's not that the floor gave. No, it was his hardwood floor in the cave literally had not been properly, like masoned out or cemented out. And he fell halfway down to the lower levels of the ground, had to be like pulled off by the firemen. So it's like, this is not a common thing, but it's just to tell you that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the history will remind you that it's there every now and then, and you have to take good care of your building. Even if it's your cave, make sure your cave has a stable ground. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's certainly a reminder that it's there when you fall through the floor.
Yep.
Good grief. And do you think that there is a certain type of person that would enjoy living in the area? Like, I mean, could it be families, couples, swinging singles, all of the above, none of the above?
Yeah, it really depends. So for clubbers, no. Like, we don't have clubs, we don't have loud music venues. So if you want to party in a loud way every night, it's not going to work. Rue de la Gaîté is probably as close as it gets to a, sort of theater and bar neighborhood. There is actually a swingers clubs next door that have a menu outside on the street, and it doesn't feel very inviting. So even for people that are into that, it didn't look very queer friendly or anything. So I'm like, don't want to go there. And that's as loud, as rowdy as it gets. No, the rest is really for families. It's really quiet, but it's also for people that want everything there. That want their cinema there. Like cab drivers, when they bring us home, they look around and say, wait a minute, you have everything here. And I say, yep. That's why we rarely go outside, because the neighborhood is so densely packed. And for the students, there are a few, because there's a lot of, the chambre de bonne at the top floor of those many buildings. But the real concentration is the Cité Universitaire Internationale. So the big student dorms that are from every country has their own building with their own architecture. There's more Le Corbusier there if you're into that for the Swiss. So it's like a park with student housing. So it's really, that's the only place where you would see so many students in the 14th, is because they're literally in their spot. Like that's their compound is the Cité Universitaire Internationale. But the rest, I would say, is mostly families, and maybe more like larger family with more children towards the west, because there's more like high rise, more social housing, and smaller families where we are, because those mini buildings are not really designed for big families. So it's like 1-2 children tops, but lots of schools.
Yeah, I do think that is one of the things that what you just mentioned about the size of the older buildings. I think a lot of people don't realize that the majority of them aren't really very family friendly because you're going to have usually 2 bedrooms at most. Every now and then 3 bedrooms. Anything more than 3 bedrooms, forget it.
Yeah.
It's really rare. And is there something that you found out after living in this area that you wish you knew before that our listeners should know about, apart from falling through the floor?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say on the positive side is really the architecture, because I had never realized how much of basically the founders of modern architecture had worked in the neighborhood. Like, because you had all these artistic types, at the type of the Montparnasse, the Lost Generation, the Hemingways and so on, their buddies were architects. So they tried crazy stuff back then. So, and you have a lot of those buildings left all around. So that for me was a positive. On the negative, because I know all of Paris and I love all of Paris, for me, the 14th was never a negative or anything. But apparently for a lot of tourists, a lot of Americans specifically, they don't know about the 14th. So they think it's the suburbs. And then when they go, they go, oh my God, there's actually all these cute little streets, and there's like, the village life and the blah, blah, blah. And so what I did not know would be this sort of V shape where, like people start trashing your place. And then the moment they arrive, suddenly there's this complete reversal. Say, oh, but this is actually really nice. And I'm like, well, yeah, duh. Like I knew it. But so I was surprised. I was surprised by their reaction. Their reaction was the surprise. I'm like, what is wrong with these people? And then I remembered, okay, they just have to learn. Like everybody else, when you don't know a place, you have to come and try it for yourself. And then, you know.
Yeah. I mean, and that's often how I end up discovering new areas that I end up liking is by going to meet a friend or whatever, or meeting somebody or trying a new restaurant or what have you. Just going out of the area every now and then. And sometimes I pleasantly, I was in the 7th earlier today, for example, and I was also there, I think on Friday, and I saw this really great looking Indian restaurant. So then I looked up all the details and I thought, oh yeah, I've got to go check that out, even though it's totally not in my area. But before I went to the 7th for work, which is why I go to the 7th now for different apartments, I always poo-pooed the 7th as well too. But there's parts of it that I actually like. Like, I'm sure I probably would love your area too, but I don't know it.
No, exactly. And that's part of the reasons why. Yeah, I mean, just you were talking restaurants, Mosuke. So there's this restaurant by Maurice Sacco, who's like the hottest chef in France right now. He mixes, West African, French, Japanese, and Mexican style flavors. Amazing, amazing chef. The thing is booked like months in advance, and he installed his restaurant in a completely dead street of the 14th. Like even I would walk by there without noticing it was there. But yeah, it can take 6 months just to get a table. So that's like you were saying, like unless you actually come in person, you don't realize. But then I ate there once and it's amazing. It's really worth it. So indeed, sometimes you just have to scratch the surface. And the beauty of it is making people, and that's why I make these tours, is I make people go and walk in small streets that don't look like anything. But actually, if you listen and if you hear about the history, suddenly it makes perfect sense. And there's value in it,
Yeah, definitely. Anything else that you could think of telling anyone about your area?
I mean, I guess there's maybe 2 shout outs. One, there's a person called, who goes by Pistinier, and so it's all in French. So for this one, you have to speak French, but she does basically everything that's happening in the 14th. So, art exhibits, vernissage, non-profit events, visits, and she's based in a former convent. So the neighborhood is actually famous for that because it was close to Paris, but in the countryside, there's all these religious communities that had massive compounds. And as, Catholicism has been going down in France, the communities are shrinking, and at some point they sell. And so in this case, the nuns were getting a bit old. They sold their compound and they say, okay, we'll get a smaller place somewhere else. And before this is converted into, new houses or building, it gets used by, there's this company called Plateau Urbain that basically does temporary use. So they put in artists, startup companies, non-profits. They do emergency housing for refugees. And so Pistinier is based there. And first she gave me a tour of the compound, which is amazing. If you have the chance, it's called the Village Ray. But she keeps this sort of ongoing schedule of exciting things that are happening in the 14th, strictly in the 14th. So that's probably a good link to give to people, like, if you want to know what's happening, because I'm all city, but she's fully focused on the 14th. And one of the other people there is called Au Cœur de la Rue, so in the heart of the street. And it's a nonprofit that takes food that's about to perish, that cannot be sold anymore in supermarkets. So they take it from the supermarkets, they cook meals with them right now, and then they give the meals for free to people in need in the street. And they're based in that same former convent. So I think it's the best thing in the world where you're preventing waste. And at the same time, you're feeding the needy locally, and they're based in that convent. So in a way, the message, because they were Franciscans, so in a way, the message of sharing and helping your neighbor, even though the nuns are gone, the message is still there. So I'm trying to raise money actually on Instagram. Is the first time I'm doing it, but it works. Partly a quarter of the goal has been reached. So yeah, if people want to help the people of the 14th in need, then they can go on Instagram and check out what's happening there.
If you're enjoying this episode of Paris, A State of Mind, you may also be interested in our sister podcast, Don't Miss This. Join Jennifer weekly for the scoop on what's happening in Paris. Paris, A State of Mind will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now back to Paris, A State of Mind. There are more and more community restaurants in Paris that are helping the needy. I used to work for one for 3 years called the Refectorio in the Crypt of the Madeleine.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, that's a classic. That's a famous one. Yeah.
But I mean, it's really important. And they have the same concept with the food waste. But I actually love that too. Now that when we go into a supermarket, you do actually have like bins of food that technically is, has to be sold by whatever date, the anti-gaspillage.
Exactly.
So rather than throw it out, they sell it at a discount price.
No, it's a huge thing. If you walk around the 14th, you'll see a lot of composting boxes that have been made by this group called les Hyper Voisins. It's like a local friendship group for the neighbors, and they organize like a giant dinner in the streets with like 600 people eating at the same time and sharing meals. And they also organize recycling of food waste. So you can compost your stuff in the streets, like all around. You don't have to walk any far. It's like at the corner of the street, you get your regular bins and you get your compost. So it's really exactly for that. So if you ever finish your plate, instead of being chastised by your parents, you can use the leftovers and put it at the local compost box. The entire neighborhood now is covered in those. It's really hyper dense. So good job on the Hyper Voisin for having done that. So no more excuses.
No, that's very good. I think we all have to be conscious of that. And so I have a big question for you though. If you could have the fairy godmother of apartments in Paris come down and offer you any apartment anywhere in the city, where would it be and what type of apartment would it be?
Yeah. So really no limits. I would take the Tour Saint-Jacques. I would literally take let's say the last 2 floors of the Tour Saint-Jacques, because it's the best view in Paris, and because it doesn't have an active church attached to it anymore. You're not going to be woken up by the bells, because that used to be the steeple of the church, but there's no bells now. So you're quiet. You get the best view in Paris. It's very central. We would probably need to install a lift, so that would be
probably.
But yeah, best view in Paris, great Gothic architecture. And if that's not possible because it's a national monument.
It's hard, yeah.
Yeah. So if I have to remain within legal, like purchasable items, I would buy actually the apartments upstairs from mine, just because the neighbors are super noisy. So this way I would keep it as an empty, quiet space above my head. So I could have a vacuum above me to just like have quiet. I will stay there, but with quiet above. That would be the plan.
Well, maybe we'll hope that one day the fairy godmother will make Tour Saint-Jacques your future home.
That would be great.
That will for sure be quiet.
Yes, definitely.
Well, thank you. And at the end of all my shows, I always want people to get to know who my guest is as well, too. So could you share a little bit about yourself to the listeners and let them know how they can get in contact with you?
Definitely. So I'm the Comte de Saint-Germain. And if you know the name from history, it's normal. You can Google it. There's actually a recent video about a history YouTube that mentioned who the Comte de Saint-Germain is and what he's been doing throughout history. So I won't go into the details. What I'm doing these days is actually taking people on walk to Paris with their smartphone. So I'm not there. You're just downloading my voice and I'm telling you, go left, go there, look down, look up, because I'm showing you things you would never see otherwise. And I started in the 14th. I'm going to leave it at some point, hopefully, because people are asking me, okay, that's great. I've done your 14th walk. Now I want something else. But the first one was really about cute little streets with lots of flowers and underground water. We talked about the Roman aqueduct a bit, but there's a reservoir. There's all kinds of things. So right now is the best season. This is the summer. Go and walk those little streets. The flowers are incredible. You'll see small individual houses with gardens inside Paris, not in the suburbs, inside Paris. So that part of the 14th is really cute. And the other part, which is less cute, it's about Lupin, like the Lupin series on Netflix with Omar Sy, Arsène Lupin, the gentleman thief that inspired the series, and the catacombs. So I take you above basically all the locations where the series was shot. I even take you to jail. So I make you walk near the walls of the Prison de la Santé. The last jail in Paris is in the 14th. And I explain to you about the jailbreaks and what's happening below your feet and the times the houses fell down in the catacombs. So it's really, you don't go there for eye candy. You go there more for like the shocking history. But again, still in the 14th. So it's a good way to show you like two completely different ways of enjoying Paris in different ways. Yeah.
That's great. Do you want to share your website or Instagram?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it's walk.paris. So the website is walk.paris. Instagram is walk.paris. So it's always the same. And then if you already know the app is called Voice Map. So if you already know the app, I'm on there too. So you can see my tours under Paris. And apparently a lot of people like to listen to them at home, even when they're not in Paris. So I got people from Montreal, listening to them like a podcast. I got people who know the neighborhood really well and said, I don't have time to walk around the neighborhood, but I really want to hear the stories. So they listen to them at home. So it's designed for listening while walking. But some people just go to Walk Paris, download the tours and listen to them like the stories of a podcast. So, hey, that's cool. Next time you come in Paris, then you can do it for real. No problem.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Well, thank you very much for everything. I hope that we've got some new lovers of the 14th after listening to this podcast, because you certainly made it sound much more interesting than what a lot of people thought, including myself.
Well, thank you. And thanks for having me. I'm glad I got to share this with you and looking forward to your in-person walking of these little streets.
Absolutely. Yes. I will have to be a convert and have more positive things to say. Well, have something to say about the 14th, because right now I don't have a lot apart from what you just said. Thanks again.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Paris, A State of Mind, featuring Gail of Perfectly Paris and Marie of Loquim, both who are founding members of the SPLM. Paris, A State of Mind is produced by Paris Underground Radio. The music, Jazz in Paris, is by Media Right Productions. For more information on this show and others, go to parisundergroundradio.com.
This episode of Paris, A State of Mind was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more great content, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio.